what brought you to where you are now? So obviously you've been through a lot and you've learned a lot and now you're coaching. So what
Mhm.
brought you to this spot right now?
It's a couple of layers of things. So, I was kind of like a serial therapy girl for a hot minute. Went to not stress management, because I literally just got off a client stress management call, uh, anger management classes, and I'm adopted, so there's always been this kind of underlying belonging
Mm-hmm.
piece for me, and I don't think that I understood it, and I'm learning more about kind of that aspect of what I needed to fix or grow from or heal from and all of those pieces. And so really there's been a couple of things that have really kind of shaken everything up. One was the passing of my daughter's father, who was a domestic violence relationship, and it was sudden. It was a motorcycle accident. Was obviously not was very unexpected. And the second one was the loss of my husband and my first baby, who we call Rainbow. And so I think for me and for any of my clients, like so often the catalyst that forces us to sit in our shit and figure out what's going on and why we're like this and really kind of dig in is usually, some people call it dark night of the soul, some people call it like a kind of an unburdening. There's, all these different phrases for it, but for me it was very like, I think COVID and the pandemic and just kind of being isolated um happened for me even before the pandemic started. So I moved from back home in New Mexico to the East Coast to be with my husband. And initially, it was to go into esthetician school, and then I decided I didn't want to do that. I was in network marketing at the time, and I loved what I was doing. And the minute I moved, it all fell apart. And so I had a whole lot of time to figure out what was wrong with me. And so that's kind of the process that came, learning all of the. I've always been a medium. I've always had lots of intuitive gifts, even as a little girl. But I think those two incidents kind of catapulted those gifts even more. And so the last about 5 to 6 years for me have been figuring out how I got here and how to get into a better space. And that has also led me to working with women. So my first coaching group was all around, it's called Selling with the Soul. And it was all around how to sell without being spammy, because network marketers are notorious for being horrifically spammy, and I hated it. And so I found tons of success with that. I loved it. And then what I started to learn in all of those classes is that the belief systems that we carry prevent us from doing the things that we learn. So we have these women that are learning the skills and the tools and the things that they need to do to connect with an audience and grow their reach and close clients and all those pieces. But if you don't believe you deserve to make more money, or if you don't believe that you're worthy of success or any type of accolades or things like that, then you automatically will stop yourself. And I've done it myself. And so I dug into what that was. And so healing modalities have been anywhere from Reiki to tarot to hypnosis to EMDR to theta healing. Like I pretty much kind of went on the non-traditional route of, let me figure out why it's this way, and um, let me figure out how to grow. And so that's what these last 5 years have been. Um, I got NLP certified, Reiki certified, and then I have several certifications for hypnosis specific to trauma. And because I think, or I know that that was the root of everything that was ailing me for all of these years. And so getting help, getting that out with a coach, and then now getting to write my own sessions and kind of get myself through a lot of this stuff has been such a huge gift. And I still have coaches and healers and people that I work with, but um, to be on the other side of so much of that, I love to help people do that. And then the podcast production company is just a whole nother layer of, when you just decide you're going to do a whole bunch of stuff, and then you just have a really incredible team and you just go for it. So um, that's probably a really long answer, but that's your answer.
No, that's really good. I know where I want to go with the next part of the call then, because I don't know if you've read my post, but I am at the moment very much stuck in the question of, am I enough? No, no, am I worth it? So not am I worthy, but am I worth it? Which is a completely different question to am I worthy? And
It is.
it's just the last 3 days, I've really been sitting in that feeling of, am I worth it? Am I worth training my dog so he doesn't kill our chickens, because he's gotten two already, but he just needs training. But am I worth
Right.
it to train him? And I for the last 8 years have really struggled with disordered eating. And so the voice is, am I worth eating better? Am I worth
Mm.
making food? Am I worth having a clean house? Am I worth? And it's been really interesting because I've been sitting with that, and also been, because I'm very honest with myself. I'm not someone that sits in lies, because I understood a long time ago that the lies don't get you anywhere, and
Mm-hmm.
they just kind of keep you circling around the same problem. And so I sat with it and I looked at it and I went, am I worth it? And I looked at myself and I looked at my life and I looked at my eating and I looked at the fact that our dog's just got another chicken. And I went, no, I'm not.
Mm.
I am not worth it. And sitting in that and going, okay. And there would have been a time not that long ago where I would have then picked up a bat and beaten the crap out of myself internally, going, well, come on, you have to be worth it. Like, now you need to go down the path of finding your self-worth and finding your self-esteem and finding your worthiness and
Right.
finding all of this. And what I realized was, going down that path of trying to fix it was a distraction to the actual feeling that is the problem. And it's been a completely different experience of being able to make the choice not to distract myself with anything and go, no, I'm right here. No, I'm not worth it. And that's okay. And so I'm keen to kind of go down the path with you of what do you do next with your clients. If a client came to you and said, I'm not worth it, I don't believe I'm worth it, how do
Mm-hmm.
you support them through that? Because I realize there are so many people in this exact same place as I am, realizing that they actually don't think they're worth it. And they've
Yeah.
been trying so hard and they've done so many things, but ultimately underneath everything, it is, I'm not worth it.
Right. I think there's a couple different ways that this has been a process with clients. I have a program called Me Season, which is all around worthiness, self-love, inner child. And it's a 6-month program, but it's a bunch of modules that really help us figure out where our belief system is stemming from. So when somebody has a belief system that they're not worth it, it's not something that you have decided for yourself. It's something typically that's an external um, source that has poured that thought into you. And sometimes we think it's like, like our mom saying like really shitty things to us when we're little. Like sometimes it's that, but sometimes it's like a boss that said like, yeah, well, I don't know why we pay you that much. Like, something like a really, and I think too often we think it's this big, huge, substantial life shifting circumstance. And sometimes it's just a little comment that just stays a little longer, and then it becomes a belief, and that belief becomes a behavior. That behavior becomes a pattern, and then our lives play out to that pattern. And so there's a couple different ways to do it. One, it would be obviously getting to the root. Hypnosis is my go-to when it comes to figuring out a belief system. And one of the things, like, this was actually really sad. This was one of the last groups at the end of last year that I had with Me Season. And one of the exercises was, it was a mirror exercise. Like, these are the things I love about myself. And there was another one that was about, when was the last time I was really happy and what was I doing? And it was 4 days. And she was like, I don't have an answer to this. I don't know when the last time I was happy. I have no concept of what I was doing. I don't know who was there. I can't remember at the time last time I felt like that. And it made me really sad because I think we've all been there where we're like, we're just doing the shit we got to do. We got to do the laundry and do the dishes and take care of kids and animals and life and significant others and all those pieces. And so I think that figuring out the root cause is the biggest piece. I always do that with hypnosis, and then there's shadow work and things like that that we'll do behind that will help one, uncover it, and two, to heal that wound, because I think I don't think it's uncommon. I mean, it's not like I don't have those moments too where you're like, I really deserve to be doing this or doing that, or be in those spaces. And I think it's a belief system that probably isn't one that you designed for yourself, that was said to you by somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. It's not just one big event. It's like just those constant, it's like this just chipping away, chipping away, chipping away, chipping away until you get to the end of, I'm 47 now, and you kind of get to this part in your life and you go, wow, it wasn't, there's not one moment. I can remember hundreds of moments that bring me back to that belief system. Then I go, yep, okay, yep, okay. And for me, I used to spend a lot of time going back and going, where did this come from? Where did this come from? But now I've kind of shifted the way I'm doing things. Instead of going back and going, where did this come from? Because I did that for 10 years. I sat and looked at where all my patterns came from and where all my sabotages came from and where all my habits came from, and so acutely aware of them. But what I found for me was that the awareness hasn't been the solution to fixing it, but the awareness has meant that if I'm triggered by something, I can see this isn't me being triggered. This is a pattern that is coming from a past experience. Even with my daughter, if I'm losing my shit for some reason about something that she's done, in the moments of me losing my shit, especially when she was younger, I would say to her, this isn't about you. This is me. This is something that happened when I was your age, and you've done it, and you're a catalyst for this situation inside of me. So don't take this on board for yourself. And it's a challenge, because then, of course, when you talk about the shadow work, I'm keen to hear what you've done with shadow work within yourself. Like, how have you dealt with those voices using shadow work to bring yourself into this space where you're past them?
There's a couple different ways. So I think for me, and everybody has a different view or different perception of what shadow work looks like. For me, it's sitting with really difficult questions about what's wrong with me, or why I do this, or why I am this way, why I react like that. And I think the more that part of the, I guess it's twofold. So the part of it is within a hypnosis session for me, and for my clients, like, we always think we know why we're that way. And what ends up happening 9 times out of 10, like, I look at just even a couple situations for myself. Like, I'll give you an example. I always had like this kind of like money block, like, I'm never going to get to where I want to be. I'm always going to be a struggling single mom. I'm always going to count change to feed my kid. Like, there was always this like really deeply rooted struggle season of my life, that I'm very happy that I'm no longer in. But it was many, many years of that. And what shadow work did for me in that regard is help me to understand what role I played in making that process take longer to get out of. Because I think for me, shadow work was accountability. When you have to look at all of the things, like really kind of account for and take stock of all the things that you like about yourself, as well as all the things that you don't, you start to really assess why those things are the way that they are and how you can actively change them. Like, even just looking at situations where if like I see like a post or something somebody says and it's like triggering to me, is sitting down and going, okay, why is this triggering? Like a perfect example was, it was right around the time that Twitch committed suicide. And my birth father actually committed suicide when I was 10, so I never got to meet him. So suicide is a very sensitive topic for me. I've never been suicidal. I never had ideations or anything like that, but um, it's sensitive to me because, you know, it's I never got to meet him because he passed before I was reunited with my birth mom. So um, you just look at kind of the trajectories of life and how would things be different if he didn't do that. And so when you think about when that happened with Twitch, there was this guy that was like started the video and he was just crying and it was like, listen, my friend, and he was just like doing the most. And I was like, why is this super triggering to me? And what came up with it was I hate performative empathy. Like I don't like when people don't ever talk to you and then they go to your funeral and talk about you're my best friend and all of our memories, and you know, and that like that came from a root uh cause of my grandpa when he passed away when I was 10, hearing my uncles talk about him like that, knowing that they were not there every day with him because I was. I'm like, I know you weren't there because I was there and you were not there. And so from a very young age, unknowingly, that became a trigger for me because I got to see that in a very devastating time for me because my grandpa was my best friend. And it changed the way that I deal with other people when they're going through struggles or when they're dealing with things. And so I learned that with shadow work. I had no idea why that would piss me. I mean, it would just like send me over the edge. Like, are you just like you don't even talk to her? Yeah, I've never seen you post on her page, and all of a sudden that's your best friend. Like, I hated that shit because it made me so mad. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I figured out why that was. And it's just an example of some of the things that shadow work I feel like has done. For me, it's accountability. And I think too often you know, we're always going to lean to our strengths. But I think if we look at our weaknesses and we look at the fault lines of who we are, um, and work through those pieces, I feel like it's even more impactful. And so for me, that's what shadow work has done for me personally.
That's such a lot to experience um, as a kid, the death. I think that changes you. My daughter watched my mum die for the first 3 years of her life. And so the first 3 years was just waiting for mum to die. And then she did 2 weeks after my daughter's third birthday. And it's really, I didn't realize how much, because my grandpa died when I was 7 or 8, like I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
And I never realized how much his passing impacted me just in feeling safe in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I really see a difference between the kids that have both of their grandparents still alive and my daughter, and the
Mm.
difference between their parents and me. Because when you lose someone when you're young, it's like this veil of safety is just, it's just removed. And all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you realize that you as this physical human being, you no longer live in the bubble of naivety that we live forever. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such a gift for kids that don't learn that until they're in their 20s or 30s or even 40s, where they don't really get the impact of that
Yeah,
trauma. But it changes you, and it affects the rest of your life, because then
it
you
does.
live with that lack of safety. You live with that most kids that haven't been through this, they have a strong foundation. Like there's something that they can stand on.
Yeah.
But when you have someone, especially for you, and I'm so sorry for your grandpa, but having someone so close to you pass away, that was such I'm assuming, a foundation for you at such a young age, to
Oh,
then have
absolutely.
that removed. It takes a minute to
Yeah.
go through that trauma when you're an adult, realizing, I'm assuming you realize that those moments actually changed how you felt on the inside,
Mm-hmm.
about trust, about safety, about humanity, about
Yeah.
there's just so much so much deep stuff as children we should never ever ever have to process. And obviously
No.
you didn't process as a kid, because most kids didn't have parents that were emotionally aware enough to sit in the trauma with their kid going
No.
through that passing.
That, and I think too, a lot of times that happens when those younger year deaths. I don't think parents do a really great job of having those conversations because they're hard and they're grieving and they're struggling, and it's so many um, pieces of what they've got to deal with that sometimes they just can't. They don't have the capacity to help you process what you're going through, and you're too little to understand how to process it yourself. My very first medium visit as a little girl was my grandpa, and it freaked me out initially because I was like, it felt like he was sitting there, like I could reach out and pick and like just curl up in his arms. And it was like, I remember telling that to a family member, and they were like, that's really weird, you shouldn't talk about that. And then as a little girl, I kind of shunned that piece of myself because I was told like that's not normal, that's not good. But I was like, he was just hanging out, sitting in his chair at the bottom of the stairs, just chilling, talking to me. Like there was no sinister, undertone for that. But I think when we don't know what that is, or when that's not something that we're accustomed to, then we don't have kids lean into it. And for me now at this point, like my kids are more intuitive than I've ever been. The baby it gets stronger. So my daughter's 23. So my it's really intuitive, strong with her. And it's even more so with the baby. And I love that. I love that he has those moments with people that have passed that love him, and to get to experience that and to watch him have those interactions, like that's peace for him, that's protection, that's love. And I think we do our kids a disservice when we teach them that there's something wrong with that, because ancestors and there's nothing scary about those people. So
I guess the downside is that animation and shows have made it scary, because as you were sharing that, I know my daughter's come to me a number of times asking about ghosts because they portrayed them as being really scary. And so to protect her, I've said, well, ghosts they're not real in that capacity. But then from just listening to you, I'm looking at it going, did I do the best thing? Am I protecting her? Or is there another way where I could have actually come at that and maybe said something like, well, ghosts that are portrayed in animation are not real. But if you ever see Nanny sitting on a chair, she's probably there. And that's okay. She's not there to scare you. She's not there to do anything. It's okay.
yeah.
But as parents, we can, and especially parents with our own shit, we can go down the path of, well, I need to protect my kid.
Yeah.
And that's the automatic program. I need to protect her.
Yeah. Yeah. The before the baby had his last surgery here in January, so Rainbow is what we call the baby that we lost before him. And those two are like hang out all the time. You can hear him giggling in the room. Like there's a very deep connection there. And I was putting him to bed the night before we were heading down to the hospital for surgery. And that, like, leading up to it 2 weeks was like calling all my spirit guides, calling all my angels, like I want protection for him, like just very much like very intentionally looking for that help and that love. Um, and so there was a lot those couple weeks leading up to it where I could feel it in the house, the shift in the house. And before that night, I was putting him to bed, and I'm rocking him, and we're talking, and I was like, "Baby Lenny, where's Rainbow?" And he looks up at me. Mind you, he's not really verbal. He looks up at me, and he lays like on my chest here. That's just like his spot. So he's laying up at my chest here, and he puts his hand, like he takes his hand because it's like laid across my arm, takes his hand and he just puts it on his chest, and he just looks up at me. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I just bawled, which he put his hand right over his chest, right where his heart was. And I was like, we're going to be okay. Like, this is going to be okay. So I think it, if we pour into it right, and if we go into it right, we get those really beautiful moments that give us at least some peace. It's still stressful, it's still scary, it's still awful, but there was some peace that day. And I felt like he kind of had some peace himself. Like he was so chill the day of surgery, like it was like just a regular, no big deal day. Um, and I do think that had a lot to do with it.
That kind of brings me to two different avenues that I'm keen to talk about, because I'd love to talk more about the trust that you have in that non-physical aspect, in the medium aspect of what you have. But then there's this part of me that wants to go down the money path, and what you were talking about previously, about having that pattern and having that belief around money. Um, I want because I actually think they might meld in together, because I'm assuming that for you to move past your money stuff, you had to move into a place of trust. Like there had to be an
Mhm.
element of trusting in something that was not physical, that was giving to you so you could receive. Would
Right.
you kind of, can we like somehow bring those two together
So
and
we can
have a
figure out how
conversation?
to mesh them. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
figure out how to mesh those two together.
because
I
so let's
think,
start with the money, your money beliefs and what you did to unravel those, because they're big, especially being a single mom. The whole money belief thing is, if you're a single mom, then you're broke. Like
oh yeah, like
that's just
struggling single mom is like
yeah.
that's like the moniker that you get.
Yes.
And I do think that there is plenty of single moms that are successful, that don't struggle, that choose single mom life, that have, babies knowing they're going to be a single mom and they're prepared for that. I think that the world tells us that's what we are, or that we become a burden. And some of it was ancestral for me, like my bloodline, like from my mother and from family members. That stuff was just kind of, some of those pieces were passed on. And that's the next stage of stuff that I'm working through right now. Just really understanding that belief system that really doesn't have anything to do with me. The parts of me, you always hear those quotes that say like you're healing your bloodline, and things that your ancestors have dealt with, and that's why different things are so hard. And so much of what I'm working through right now is those pieces, because I've figured out all the source pieces. I'm, I've built a whole company. I have 10 employees. Like, there's very little fear behind my abilities at this point, or my worthiness around making money. But I want to know more. And so this next stage is all around the ancestry pieces, and being adopted, and what my father went through and what my mother went through, and some of those things that I had no idea. So that's what I'm digging into now. So we'll see how that goes. Today was the first session and it was pretty heavy. So
Yeah. Wow. So if you can remember, what were some of those key money beliefs that you had about yourself, apart from the single single mom struggling? What were some that you may have found that you were surprised about, that you went, oh, I didn't even think that would have been a
yeah.
thing?
So one of the things that I did, I would paint myself into difficult situations, making bad decisions on purpose, unconsciously. Like nobody, I don't think people just go out and be like, I'm just going to do dumb shit. Like nobody really does that on purpose.
Yeah.
Um, but I would make really bad decisions at different points. And then I would have my parents come in and save me. And it was
Oh, that's mine.
based upon a belief
Yeah.
system that I needed to prove that they loved me, because there are parts of little me that didn't feel that growing up. And so the validation and the shift for me in that moment, that like tactile, like my family does love me, came from understanding that like, oh, I did this to I literally self-sabotaged myself, paid myself in a corner, and then I call my parents to help me, and then they help me, and then I'm like, oh, they do love me, okay. And then that was like the hit I needed, and then we just keep it moving. And I didn't know that until just a couple, like probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I think a lot of us do that, so often it all comes inner child things so often. Oh my God, so often. But and it's not always a big, huge thing, but it's just feeling like I was important. And so to make myself important, I'm gonna make you help me. And then when you help me, I'm like, yay, they love me. And then I keep it pushing. And then when I need that hit again, I paint myself into another corner. And then I'm like, I need you to help me. And they would help me again. It was a pattern for many years that I didn't even get out of until probably like 2010, 2011. Um, when I was in network marketing, I was making a substantial enough income to not need their help like that. Um, but also understanding why I needed it, what need I was filling and what wound I was trying to heal.
Mm. So back then in 2010, 2011, you weren't doing this work because you only started this work 4 or 5 years ago, didn't you?
Yeah, almost 6 years, but yeah.
So then it sounds like you didn't consciously heal that part of you that was using your
Back
parents
then,
for love back
back
then.
then, no. Mm-mm.
Yeah, right.
And I, I, I knew that I needed to do something that wasn't the job that I had because I had so much debt that I'm like, I'm literally never going to get out of it making this much money. And so network marketing became that tool that helped me do that. And then it did eliminate it in the interim. And then moving cross country and starting a whole new life, like you don't have your parents to and I obviously I have my at the time he's my boyfriend, I have he's my husband now, but um I knew that I didn't want to go back home, no matter what it took to figure out not returning to my home state. So
Mm-hmm.
then you start to look at how can I make sure that doesn't happen, and the healing ended up kind of being a byproduct of some of those pieces.
So we're looking back now. Um, was there anything you had to realize about yourself that anchored the ability to take care of yourself? Because obviously, even though you earn money, that doesn't necessarily automatically eliminate the belief system, because at any
Right.
time you could lose all of that money and then end up
Right back
back
where you were.
right
Hmm.
back where you were. So I'm just trying to look to see how um I know you did it unconsciously back then, but have you done it consciously now?
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely very conscious now. And I think too, um, I'm also not looking to impress people anymore. I think that so many stages of my life where I wanted to look a certain way and dress a certain way and be looked at a certain way. And um, it was that was where my worthiness lied. And it was a conversation I had with a girlfriend actually not that long ago about like, when I was in my skinniest body, my most fit body, I was in really horrible, horrific, abusive, toxic relationships. And so, really looking at what part I played in those situations and how I could get myself to a place where I was happy if I was in sweatpants and a bun and not feeling like, and it's not that I don't still love everything sparkle and pretty shoes and purses and fun things, whatever. But it wasn't, there's no worthiness of my belonging to that now. Like I don't have a tie to like, just because I have pretty shoes on, like I'm worthier than I am if I'm wearing flip flops. But I
Yep.
did used to believe that. And so I made decisions based upon needing exterior things for me to feel like I belonged anywhere, because I had this really deep belonging wound that I hadn't figured out yet. And I was trying to fill it with all the things, from food to bad decisions to stupid boys to pretty clothes to drinking too much. Like, every horrific coping mechanism that someone can learn, I had adapted at different points, fighting, all just everything that you could think that you probably don't want to do. I did, just because I was trying to fill that void, and I don't have to do that anymore. And that's peaceful.
And so to get to that place where you don't have to do that anymore, I am assuming that was just bucket loads of mind work, like bucket loads of constantly talking to yourself, constantly talking to that broken part inside of you, constantly letting those parts know that you are loved, that they don't need to protect you anymore, that you are okay.
It is. And I think too, it became a shedding process as well, because I think, I'm one of those people that, like, I love people way too hard and I love people way too much in a lot of situations. And sometimes those put blinders on us about whether or not someone really loves us back. And part of healing that is deciding, okay, that's probably not a person or a situation that I'm going to keep in my life. And so you start to really assess everything around you, because if you are trying to change, if you're trying to build a new life, if you're trying to make better decisions, but everybody that you're around makes shitty decisions and does shitty behaviors, like, you're never going to get out of that. You're going to, and I do think it's true. Like, you become like the people you spend the most time with, or the people that you have the closest capacity, close proximity to you. And I didn't have a lot of healthy people in my life back then. And so I don't think we talk enough about the loneliness that happens when we start getting our shit together, and how a lot of people just fall away. And I think too often, and I had this conversation today, I was like, there's the next money block that I'm working on is, like, as I've gotten more successful, as my company's grown, and as year 3 of having my podcast, there's a perception in my hometown, which is a very, very, very poor town. Like, it's not, people don't, and there's not that nobody makes money there, but it's not, it's poverty. And there's this belief that, like, if I get to a certain level, that, like, what if I don't have anybody, like, what if no one wants to talk to me anymore? Like, what if I'm become like a, 5, 10, $15 million company, and then I go home and nobody wants to talk to me because, like, oh, you think you're too good now? Because I do think I've seen that happen to other people that left that environment. And so that's kind of the final piece for me that I have to kind of heal and move from.
I get that one. I have that too. If I am not, so if I'm not dense and hard and heavy and sad and a victim and poor and really down on myself and just in the mud, if I'm not in the mud, then what conversations am I going to have with people around me? Like, how will I communicate with these people if I'm not in the mud? So then for me, it's coming back to that. Am I worth it? Am I worth it? Am I worth having time where I actually don't have any friends, because I'm aware that I no longer want to have those mud conversations with people that keep pulling me back down, that keep pulling me into the mud, that just keep me there. And especially around money, I find it really hard. I don't know if this is like this for you, but I find it really hard where I'm having conversations with friends and they're complaining about not having money. And there's this part of me that goes, actually, I don't want to have this conversation. I actually don't want to complain about not having money, because I don't see it beneficial. I cannot see how, if I keep having this conversation, my situation is going to change. It can't.
Because I do think no, and I do think the things that you say and the way that you talk about everything has power behind the belief system. And so even when you look at like, you know, you talk about the loneliness and not like having friends, like, you know, 9 times out of 10, I'm not trying to gossip with you. Like, I don't want the tea. I don't want you to tell me, you know, talk shit about somebody. Like, I don't want to be entertained with that. If you're dealing with something and you want some help, down for that. Let's, you know, discuss the solution. But to like get on the phone and just be like, oh, you see what so and so, like just bashing people 24/7. Nah. But I used to love it. Like I
Yeah,
was
me
the
too.
queen of getting it. Like I'm like, please come over here and spill some tea. I want to talk shit about everybody
Yeah.
today. Now it just
Yeah.
doesn't do anything for me.
And you
And
cannot
that's
keep
good.
those same friends. You cannot.
No.
I don't care who
Mm-mm.
you are. You cannot keep those same friends that talk shit about everything, or that, like, with the, obviously with the last 3 or 4 years, I was in an environment where people were going all about what the government is doing, and how, you know, all the conspiracy theory type stuff. And I was right down those rabbit holes, and I'm surrounded by rabbit hole people, and I'm like, I don't want to I don't want to be in this space where I'm afraid of what my government is going to do to me. Like, I don't want to
Right.
have these conversations anymore. I actually shut down my entire Facebook profile and created an
Oh, wow.
entirely new one, because my whole profile was just covered in people who were vegan and who were also conspiracy theorists. And I had to stop being vegan because it was killing me. I've almost died 3 times going vegan. And I'm now acutely aware that I cannot, this last time was the worst. I'm acutely aware that I cannot go vegan. So I find it really hard to be around those conversations where people are bashing meat eaters. It's like, I
Yeah.
cannot be friends with people that bash meat eaters, because I am now a meat eater. Because if I don't eat meat, I'm dead. And it's like, it's a choice
Right.
between me or the animal. And it is
Right.
coming to those moments in life where it's, am I worth it? Am I worth walking away from these meat bashers or people bashers, or, you know, complainers? Am I worth walking away from them, having time in isolation where I'm very alone, and it's very lonely. It's very lonely on my Facebook profile for a while with no one on there. And even now, I think I've only got 25 friends, because I'm hand picking the people that I actually want as friends. If I'm going to sit there and I'm going to scroll my feed, I want to know that the information that I'm reading is something that I really, really, really want to participate in. And it makes such a difference.
It does. Like one of the things that my one-on-one clients and I that I require them to do when we start the work, before we start really doing the healing work, is really looking at like schedules and like what we do in the morning when we get up. And when you wake up in the morning and you pour in mess, then you play catch up all damn day. And I've
Yep.
tested it a couple times just to be like, because my clients are like, oh, it's fine, I can do it. And I'm like, okay, well, let me try it with you. We're gonna both wake up and read mess and see how we feel in 2 hours. And we're both like, that was not a good decision. Like, I think being more mindful of the people that we interact with, and even within family and friends, like there are plenty of people that I still technically have on my page. They're unfollowed. Like I don't see nothing they post. They might like something of mine, but I'm like, I don't do hate talk. Like you can't get on my page and talk shit about people. Um, don't say hateful things to other people in the comment
Yeah.
section. Like I will call you out publicly in front of almost 3,000 people on my page. Like I don't care, because I just think the way that we treat other people matters. And I don't think the world is as kind as it needs to be. And so if I have to uh, get rowdy, then we're going to get rowdy. That's just going to be what it is.
That's also a reflection of how people are treating themselves. And I'm so clear about that. When I wasn't being kind to myself, and I was punishing myself, and I was in that really dark, dense place, I would get on Facebook and I'd read people's posts, and I'd go on this, what are you talking about? You got no idea what you're talking about. And now I look back and I go, wow, there are lots of things I wish I hadn't said. But I also understand it was because I was not in a space of kindness. I was not being kind to me. But now I'm here, and now my focus is, how can I be kind to myself? How can I be
Mhm.
kind to those parts inside of me that are hurting? Because they're not wrong. They're not damaged. they're not worthy of being punished. They're sad, they're hurt, they're vulnerable. And if I get angry at them, they're just going to get worse. They're not going to get better. So now for me, it's all about kindness. And now it's like I have this impossible ability to say something horrible or negative in any way, anywhere. It's really hard. It's really hard to say something horrible to someone that I do not know on Facebook, or respond to something in a horrible way on YouTube. But I understand why people do it, because they are hating all of these parts inside of them that are hurting.
It's all projection.
It's all projection.
My messiest, meanest, cruelest seasons of my life, it was just self-hatred that just spilled out on everybody else. And, you know, I think when we're messy and hurt and struggling inside, everybody else pays a price, you know, that's close to us. And that's not a fun realization. That was probably my least favorite of like, why are you so fucking mean? Like, oh, it's because you're miserable and you don't like yourself and you think it's fun to beat people up because you want people to hurt like you're hurting. And so this is what you're doing in the world. And it's not a fun process to look at those really ugly pieces of yourself. I did not enjoy. I will never enjoy it. But to genuinely be really happy with who I am as a human being now in the world and how I treat others, like that was worth how difficult that stage was.
Yeah. And of course now that stage is just it's a memory.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look back at it and go, okay, yes, it was hard, but it was hard back then. Now I'm here.
Yeah, my daughter was cracking up the other day. She was like, Mom, like, I don't even remember what we were talking about. Somebody messing up an order or food coming out wrong. And it's like, you messed up my order at a restaurant. Oh, I was going to flip shit. Like, I was going to get the whole meal paid for, all the managers were going to come down. We were going to get a whole nother meal. Like, I was like, I always had an axe to grind with somebody at all times. Like, it was just like, I went out looking for reasons to battle with people. And my daughter and she saw this growing up. And the other day she was like, I don't even know who you are right now, because like you would have completely come unglued, probably owned part of the company, had the manager fired, and had us like have front row parking to like whatever restaurant it was if they did that again. Like, what is happening right now? But I think it's good for her to see me change, because that wasn't a mom that she should have probably been all that proud of, because that was not cute. And not that there's not times when if I need to be a little rowdy, I will. But it's very rare at this point. And it's only really most of the time in advocating for my babies in some form or fashion, when you'll really see that side of me.
Yeah, me too. I get that.
Yeah.
And then it's also
Mama bear.
Yes. But it's also realizing, it's taken me a minute to realize this, that kindness does not mean allowing people to walk all over you. And it does not mean setting a boundary and then letting people just step over the boundary. And I learned that really recently. I had someone living on my block of land, and they were really they were overstepping the marks of what I wanted. And so I started to push back a little bit, just a little bit. And one day she came up to me and she goes, I don't know what's wrong. You were always so kind. It's like, I am kind, right up until the point where somebody steps over the boundary line, because there are parts inside of me that are here to say, no, that's not okay. And it's okay to be kind, but then it's also okay to put a hand up and go no through that kindness, because it's kindness for yourself. And if someone is overstepping the boundaries in your space, then the kindness is to say no.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to clarify that, because I know that sometimes it's easy to think that, well, I can move to kindness, but then people just walk all over me.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, the people that have an issue with boundaries being set where you can't just they can't just do what they please, are the people that benefited from you not having them. You know, people that had access they didn't necessarily deserve, or capacity that they didn't really have the capacity for. And I think, you know, I've gotten really good at boundaries at this point, and I think setting kind boundaries. Like I literally did a podcast episode about boundaries itself. It came out like 2 weeks ago, because I do think, you know, you see these things where like no is a full sentence, but yeah, well, you also have to like be kind when you do stuff. Like you can't just be like, well, I don't fucking want to go, and I said I was going to be there, and I just decided I'm not going to do it, and I don't really give a shit what you think. Like that's not kindness. That's not a boundary. You're being an asshole. So like let's back it down. Let's figure out how to like address it properly, where
Yeah.
we're not being cruel or we're not being dismissive of others. Because people are going to feel how they're going to feel regardless. But if you go into it with an unkind approach, that changes the dynamics of that situation, and then you're making it, you know, messy and heated and all these other layers that it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. I've loved this conversation so much. It's been nice having a conversation with another single mum who, I don't know, who's just there. He's just there. Like you're just here. You're not distracted. You're not having distractive tools ruling your life. You're just here, having just living in the moment.
Yeah.
I think it makes such a difference.
It does. I think too, like part of a huge piece you were talking about shadow work and kind of what that looks like. Um, there's an accountability piece to it when it came to my daughter of like, you know, taking the time to ask somebody like, in what ways have I hurt you? And how do I, you know, how can I mend that, or how can I apologize, or what can I do to make that better? And I don't think we do ask that question a lot. I think uh, a lot of people are waiting for apologies they'll probably never receive. But for me, when it comes to my babies and those closest to me, um, if I fuck up, you're going to hear me apologize. You're going to hear me sit in it. You're going to hear me be like, oh yeah, I definitely like, you know, I'm not dismissive of when I'm the problem, because I think I think part of single motherhood, at least in different stages, was like, I could play victim so fucking well. Like Academy Award winning actress on the victim mentality. And, accountability was really hard for me back then. And now I'm like, nah, like definitely the problem. Absolutely owe you an apology. Will do everything I can to make it right. And please know that this was not intentional. Um, and I would probably say things like that back then, but I didn't mean them. I did them out of survival versus, you know, a genuine desire to make things right.
Yeah. And it's really important. I know I have raised an amazing kid, and through my trauma, I have taught her tools, understanding when I had her, understanding that I had trauma, understanding that there's absolutely no way she can come through her childhood without going through trauma, just the fact that she was my kid. And I've raised her so well in that she will actually, if I'm doing something now, and she's 8, and she thinks I'm wrong, and I can be in the heat of the moment, she'll look at me and go, Mom, you're wrong. And I don't think you're being very fair right now. I think you need to think about what you're doing. And it can take a minute when you have a kid.
It's a little jarring. You're like, oh,
when you have a kid say that to you. But I do. I go, okay, I will. And because there's enough awareness for me to go, okay, I've taught her to tell me when I'm wrong. I've taught her to stay in her truth and know when she is in her truth and know when she's doing something wrong. And I call her on her when she's wrong. I have to allow her to call me on when I'm wrong. And I think the most powerful words that can come out of any parent is, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
I don't think that happens enough. You know, there's this like, you know, mom is not always right. Mom can be an absolute fuck up sometimes. Like, listen, like it's just what it is. But and I think it also for me, like, I mean, my daughter's 23 now, so she's like she'll be 23 next month. she's like a whole adult, and like I don't have to do anything for her. Like she's lived on her own since she was 18. She doesn't need help with bills or rent or financing her car or anything. She has, and it's in part due to watching me be an absolute shit show. Um, you know, and also being really honest about that and really like, okay, these are the mistakes that I made. Here's how not to make them. Here's how to build your credit. Here's how to, you know, do all these different things that I had to learn the hard way when I was rebuilding versus when I started out the gate, because I wasn't given those tools either. And so I think we learn, if we do it right, we learn what we didn't do properly and then pass those lessons on to them so that they can learn from our mistakes, not on their own, but so that they don't do that. And that's probably, she's such a testament to like when you're really honest with your kids. And I think too, she just kind of came out as like a 35-year-old lovely lady. Like she was, we joke about it. She was an old soul from the beginning.
Yeah.
She was probably more adult than I was for the better part of her life growing up. But we grew up together. I mean, I was 21 when I had her. So we were, you know, we were young.
You were still a kid yourself.
Yeah, I had zero business
Yeah.
raising a baby. She's, I'm very lucky. She's incredible because she definitely she didn't have the best situation to grow up in, unfortunately.
But you obviously somewhere along the line did something right because
Yeah.
she's independent. She's not living with a victim mindset. She's not living with a victim soul where she thinks her mum and dad or her mum is going to come and save her. She doesn't have that. She doesn't have that buried in there. So somewhere along the line, you did good.
Yeah. There's I didn't mess up completely. So I guess that's good. It's I think, you know, it was a lot of lessons, and my son gets a completely different mom than she got.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard because, you know, like I get to be really present. Like he stayed home with me today and we snuggled in the bed for most of the day, and I only had 2 client calls, so it wasn't a whole ton of stuff that I was doing. And I was in such a struggle season when she was 4 years old that like that was never going to be a life. And so um you know, there's always the forgiveness that you have to give yourself when you are no longer in that place, and the guilt that you carry, you have to let it go, because we can't keep that shit forever, because then it'll stop us from even getting to the next level that we want to get on, or then the next success that we're looking for. um because I did have tons of guilt with what she went through and what I put us through with my messiness. And we had a conversation, probably it was actually when she flew out here when I lost the baby. um and it was very much like me apologizing to her, like, I'm sorry for like all the times I fucked up. Like there's more than I'll probably ever know. And if there's one specific you need me to address, like, let's talk about it. But she had like the most beautiful response, and she was like, Mom, if you would have been any different, then I wouldn't be who I am, and I'm really proud of who I am. And so I think I think it's okay. Like, I get it. Like, I know you weren't the way that you were because you were trying to be that way. It's just, you know, all of the things that I needed to heal. And not that I don't think we ever completely finish product ourselves and we're like, I'm perfect now. I'm just, there's no problems and nothing bothers me. And I make all the, you know, I don't think any of us ever get to that. Um, but being peaceful is pretty nice.
And that's such a beautiful thing for your daughter to say to you. Like, what a
It
gift.
was. I was crying in the middle of the Denny's
Yeah.
by the airport.
I have those moments with my daughter now because same thing. I have a lot of parenting guilt. She's been through a lot. She went through me almost dying because of my eating disorder. She's gone through me grieving my mum. Like, mum died 5 years ago, and I'm only just coming out of grieving her death. So for the first 8 years of my daughter's life, it's been watching my mum die, watching me grieving my mum while she's dying, then grieving her dying and me with the disorder, and then like all the trauma that I'm now processing because I now have a kid, it's amazing. I processed a lot of trauma before I had a kid, but it's a whole different world of trauma after you have a kid. Like the level of unsafety and fear that is amplified in your body after you have a kid is incredible. And
Oh yeah. They didn't tell us that.
They didn't. No, they didn't. They don't say that your
There was no
level of
preparation. I was like, oh, cool, this is gonna suck. Like,
yeah, they show you all the rainbow and the unicorns and the fairy floss of having a kid, and they don't say, actually, you know what? You are going to feel terrified every minute of every day that your kid is going to die, especially if you've lost someone when you were young. Like that reality is right there. And yeah, having to live with that and then raising her while I'm aware that what I am doing could potentially be fucking her up, because I understand what happens to yourself with trauma. And there are times where I sit there and I say to her, I'm so sorry. I said, I'm so sorry for the life that you are having to live because of the experiences I had when I was a kid. And she sometimes looks at me and she goes, Mum, you know what? I know that nothing that you do is about me. And I know that that you're raising me with the awareness that when I'm older, I can deal with this trauma. She said, I know that you're doing everything you can for me in the way that you can do it. And she's 8. I'm like, how? Yeah. How?
She came out a 33-year-old woman as well. That's what happened. Really you gave birth to a 33-year-old.
She came out with just so much awareness. But then, and I want to say this to you, that in these moments, I actually take that on as my parenting, that it was my parenting that has created her to be like this. And I have moments where I'm proud of myself in my parenting, and I own that. And I wanted to share that with you because your daughter is the way she is because of you, because of your parenting. And that is something to be proud of. And
she's a good human.
I have to take those moments and be proud of my parenting through my trauma, because my daughter is who she is because of me. There's no one else here. Her dad's not here. My mum and dad aren't here. Like there's no one else here. And I homeschool her.
Yeah.
So she is that way because of me. And your daughter is the way she is because of you. And we're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Through our trauma, we are doing a good job.
Yeah, it is. I think we don't take enough time to give ourselves a little bit of love. Like, okay, bitch, like you're really like, you're doing some things. Like, good job today. You didn't flip out today. Good job,
You loved your kid. Good job.
Yeah, like you didn't let that trigger have you spiral. Good job. Like I think gratitude is such a huge piece of practice for me on a daily basis and sometimes even an hourly basis. And I think there's so much perspective for me in gratitude in general for so much that has happened, and the health of the baby despite his heart condition, the success of my daughter despite my messy, we figure it out at some point. It gets a little easier.
It does.
Yeah.
I know if I keep talking, it's going to take us down another rabbit hole.
We'll just have you on Resilient Heart, and then we'll just have a whole nother rabbit hole we'll climb down.
That's right. Because I could. There are so many different, we didn't talk about the trust, but I've loved this conversation more. I think this conversation was just such a good reminder that we are being good parents, and it's such a good thing to share.
I think too, like if you're one of those people, like my girlfriends and I talk about this all the time, like I think you're at least on the right track in some form or fashion if you're constantly checking yourself, like, did I do that right? Should I handle that differently? If you're bouncing it off people that you know and you trust them as parents as well, like, sometimes we have to bounce those things, like, here's what happened with my kid, like, how would you handle it? This is what I'm thinking. And I think if we stay conscious of like needing to kind of check that all the time, I think we end up better in general because we're going through it aware versus reactive. And for me, that seems to help. Though there's still times where I'm like, take your kid. I don't want to do this today. I can give it to my husband. Here's your son. You can have the baby today. I'm done.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. I'm done today. I'm going to bed. Have your kid.
That's so funny.
So yeah. But even learning how to parent with somebody versus parenting by myself was a very brutal process for me. And it was probably not super fun for him. I was very like, I got it. Let me do it. And then I would get mad that he didn't do it, but I told him not to do it because I was doing it. Like that super independent, used to doing it by myself gene that was like ingrained in my DNA at that point. It's hard to unlearn that and to give that respect and that grace to somebody else who's he's a wonderful dad. But I was not great. I was probably really difficult to co-parent with for quite a while, for at least a couple, like a year and a half, probably. But I'm getting better. So
that is good. I am actually so aware of my trauma patterns around parenting because my dad left when I was 3 days old. So I was raised by a single mum. I knew so much about how I was never going to, one, have a successful relationship and have a kid. It just wasn't going to happen. That I made the decision to go down the donor path and to raise her as a single mum because I just knew it just wasn't going to work with a partner.
Right.
And I think there's power in for you acknowledging that it was hard, and then there's power in me acknowledging that it was never going to work. Like, yeah, I couldn't have done it.
And I think, I have so many friends that like chose it. Like they purposely got divorced. They're like, yeah, I just wanted to have the babies and I'm done. Like,
yeah.
I think knowing what works for you and what you feel like is the best fit, like, is so important. And for everybody, it looks different and it can change as we grow and learn. And there might be some point where you're like, you know what, I might be kind of cool to be like, have somebody to build a life with. And there might be other points where you're like, because I was always like, it's actually funny, but it was mortifying my parents. They, like they always ask about, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, like, I want to be a nurse. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a firefighter. I was like, I want to be a mom. I want to have 9 kids and I want to live. There's a neighborhood that was right next to my neighborhood growing up. I want to live in this neighborhood, have 9 kids. And they're like, oh, who are you going to be married to? I was like, oh, I'm not going to be married. My dad, I thought he was going to fall on the floor, like mortified. Because I always knew I want to be a mom, but like that piece took me a while. And it really was until I met my husband that I was like, well, I actually want to like build a life with somebody. Up until then, I was like, not so much. I don't really care. If you try to marry me or if you try to be with me like that, I was like, bye. I would take off. And so I think, once you find where you're meant to be, it's still difficult, but it works out at some point.
Oh, thank you, ma'am, for this fabulous conversation.
No, thank you.
That call with Gabby was amazing. I didn't know I was going to be talking to her about being a single parent and having a single parent conversation and then having parenting through trauma and having those moments of understanding that our trauma is going to damage our kids. We cannot get through life without it damaging our kids. But then also understanding that by owning the trauma, owning the meltdowns, owning the pain, owning the sadness, owning the punishment, by owning that then teaches our kids that they're okay. They are okay, that they are not the reason why we are the way they are, why we are the way we are. And I think that is a very big difference in parenting from what my mum did to what I'm doing, because my upbringing was, I believed, whether she did it on purpose or not, I believed I was the reason she was the way she was. And my dad enabled that by telling me I was the reason she was the way she was. My dad used to say when I talked to him about mum drinking, he would say, well, what do you expect? You're a terrible child. Like, what kind of parent says that to their kid? Apparently mine does. And so there was this constant enabling that I was the cause. I was the cause of my family being the way they are. And I don't do that with my daughter. My biggest gift to her is to say, you are not the reason I am the way I am. I am the way I am because of my own upbringing, because of my own inability to deal with what I'm going through right now, or because of my own insecurities that I have created in my brain, or everything that I'm doing, I am owning for myself and not making it about her. I do not want to make it about her. I want her to know that it's me. And I feel like that is a very empowering place for her to be. And so having this conversation with Gabby, it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was nice to have a parenting conversation. Yeah. So remember, if you want to find out more about Gabby, do check out the description below because her links are going to be in there. And if you want to find out more about me, you can go to lovecreatesfreedom.com. And please make sure you also like this episode and share it, because as we all know, the YouTube algorithms only respond when they're liked and shared. They don't respond when people watch it. They need the likes and they need the shares and the comments. So if you want to comment, if you've got any questions, please put it below in the comment section. And I think that's it. And I do have a cold, in case you are wondering, but I really wanted to have this call with Gabby anyway. So I had the call through my cold, and now I'm going to go and have a warm lemon and honey drink to help soothe my throat back down again. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next episode. And remember, you are greatly appreciated. Mwah.